Have you ever had to lien a property?
The lien was literally only as good as the paper it was printed on.
How do you sell yourself?
I do not personally do door-to-door.
Which one of these is going to be making more money? Sales manager or the GM?
Clear messaging and branding is living rent-free in your customer's mind.
How do you talk with your people about a reduction in pay?
If there is a reduction in workforce, and that is ultimately the leader's fault.
How are you transparent with your workers?
There's no bad teams, only bad leaders.
What percentage of revenue is your office staff at?
I hate increasing barrier of entry for people buying from me.
What's a screw up that you would say you're proud of now?
A big screw up was
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
trees. It is Thursday. Welcome to another podcast episode of Beers with Contractors. Terry, how you doing, sir?
Doing good, Will. How are you?
I think you're doing way better than everybody else. That's north of our studio here.
Wait, are you not sitting outside in 50-degree weather?
I am not.
In sunshine? No. No wind.
Watch your tone, sir, because some of our 5 listeners are, I know, because they reached out to me recently in Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, and obviously they're in the cooler parts of this front right now. So please keep your gloating to yourself for the this episode. By the way, to our listeners, Terry texts me last night this beautiful picture of him sitting on the Riverwalk in San Antonio with a beer in his hand.
Yep.
Obviously outside, beautiful weather. And I intentionally did not respond until the next day. I'm like, screw you, Terry.
I prescribe to the idea of it's better to be lucky than smart any day of the week. And the fact that there's a trainers conference down here in San Antonio when Oklahoma's getting some of the coldest weather of the season is not my fault. I mean,
Yeah. You do not control the weather. I will give you credit there.
yes.
So they're training you to be a better trainer? Is that what's going on?
So what it is it's a group of industry professionals that focus in on training for the high voltage lineman industry. And so with the responsibilities I have, I get to come down and go through some of the training, see what's the new material coming out, and try and understand a better way of communicating the information to our students.
That's very cool.
Yep.
If I have the opportunity, which I can't say too much, I was in Daytona Beach, Florida last week, 80-degree weather, loving life. So, you enjoy it while you got it, sir.
Well, you know it as well as I do. Going to some of these conferences or events, it is nice to be able to be around individuals who are as focused into whatever aspect of the industry as you are, because, you can be back in Oklahoma, Will, and you might talk to a handful of foundation repair folks. You go to a conference and you're going to talk to nothing. And so it's always good to have those conversations.
Yeah. Well, and everybody especially lives in their tiny little boxes in their own little business and don't realize there's people out there that have the same problems you got. So just got to connect and network. So speaking of network, we have every 8 episodes, as you know, Terry, but any of you guys have not been with us a while, know that every 8 episodes we go through our Q&As. So questions out there that get floated to me in email, some through our social media, some in the contractors groups I'm a part of. We try to summarize some of those up, and rather than it being in the tiny little box of that conversation, like you mentioned before, we try to get it out there into some content for you guys. So Terry, before we get started, the routine, let me go through some new subscribers. And if you do get a chance, go ahead and like and subscribe, please. We love it. I watch that thing every waking minute to see how many subscribers we have. Not really, but I do like to converse with many of you guys out there. So when you do comment, I read those. So some new subscribers, Mike, and then Galaxy 98989, which is funny. It's the number 9A, then spelled out 9. Digital Wear, and actually this is a cool one. And before we jumped on the podcast today, Andy Shaw of Bricky's Network, spoke to him. He's in Victoria, Australia, has a brick association, a bricklayers association. And there's been tons of change down there. We're working with them through our performance application, but it was so cool. So Terry, we met at 3 o'clock, and that was 8 o'clock his time, the day, like tomorrow. It broke my brain. It's like, wait a minute, I'm meeting with you this day, but you're in the future. And that was just wild to think that we were meeting with somebody, a day ahead of us. But cool. So Terry, let's go, man. Let's knock this one out.
All right, you ready for this,
like
Will?
10, 12 questions maybe. All right, let's see if I can knock it out.
All right, so get your thinking cap on this one, right?
All right, I got my thinking beer and koozie on.
That will work. So, Will, wanted to get your take on how long you give customers in terms of time to pay their final invoice, and how strict are you when you set a due date? How do you hold to it?
Okay, so this was something I was really bad when in my younger days, and I think a lot of contractors do this, where they get stuck in this mindset of they're almost afraid to ask for their final bill because they're worried that the customer is going to be upset. In my younger days, I was the same way. I got better when I met a few other owners that were just like, if you start setting that precedence from the day one, even from the estimate that when the job is completed, we will collect it, it makes it way easier to ask for payment at the end. Let me outline this. When people are not paying you for your work at the completion, it typically falls into two categories. It's number one, a condition, meaning the money is tied up somewhere in escrow, or it's got to be liquidated from an investment account, or an objection, which is, hey, I don't like the work. I have a problem or concern about this, which if you get into that, you got to be real careful because you could actually undo your contract if you're not careful. And I think a lot of contractors get stuck in that with that final payment. So when I look at final payments due upon completion, that's exactly what it is. But then again, if there's something that the homeowner is concerned about, like, address it quick, man. Don't let that thing just simmer out. But if it's add-on, you got to call timeout and say, hey, by the way, that is not outlined in our contract. And more importantly, if you'd like that, I have to outline a new contract. But before I can do that, I need to close up the first one, because sometimes those can be viewed as punch work. Punch work's completely normal. I mean, that's why a lot of contractors have bad reputations out there, because they take that final payment, they don't complete the punch work, which is ruining it for everybody else. But go ahead.
So, Will, you referenced your contract multiple times. Do you think having a contract helps with securing this final payment? And would you go into any job without a contract now?
Yeah, and the contract is just a formal agreement between the customer and us. And I mean, I think it's good because it prevents hearsay, like, well, what was talked about, what was not. But the contract just says it. That's exactly what we talked about. So I also think, like, it's important to understand, and we run into this all the time with customers. Most people go to Home Depot or Lowe's website, find the material costs, and assume, like, well, why are you charging me X? Like, I could have done this myself for half the cost, but they don't understand overhead. Most customers don't understand you paid for the materials, you paid for the labor, you paid for, hell, the lead, marketing-wise, through Google and everything else. So, like, you're the last one to get paid as the owner. And, if you outright just tell customers that in a polite way, of course, like, hey, I've paid my vendors, I've paid my people, I've paid, my office staff, I've paid my phone bill. And in order to satisfy all of that and help more people, I need this payment based on our terms. And most people are like, all right, yeah, I get it. And they just didn't think about that. And gosh, the amount of stress that puts on a contractor, especially the small, mom and pop operations out there, that cash strain is just, it's like depressing. It just beats a person down. So that's where it's like, I hate to say money can't buy happiness, but damn, it can buy a hell of a lot of business happiness. Yeah. But that's one of the things that I think are really important. And we had an episode, gosh, this has been a while now. Matt Jones, great attorney, broke down contracts. And go back and listen to that. It's a great episode. Matt is just so full of knowledge. And we have him come talk to our sales and production teams once every quarter to go over, hey, by the way, let's just talk about what a contract is and why it's so important. But yeah, payment upon completion. And then You asked like how often do I hold to my like terms in there? If it's a condition, I'm pretty loose about it.
Okay.
But if it's an objection, yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, we're happy to do that, but you're going to have interest charges popping up the day it hits 30 days overdue.
Okay.
So, and we've done that and people will pay it. But, that's where the human element comes out too. So, but yeah, there it is. Collect them payments, pay them bills, and be nice about it.
Will, have you ever had to lien a property, and do you have a clause in your contract that addresses liening property if they don't pay?
Yeah. It's funny. I have a friend of mine, and I used to think my contracts were really bad because I think our contracts right now are like 8 pages. And there's a lot of stuff in there. Some of it's boilerplate, but you need it. And then went over his contract, it's 27 pages. And I'm like, what the hell? But you go through it, and, he needs all of that in there. And yes, I do have a lien clause in my contract. We have exercised it just a handful of times. I also have an arbitration clause in there. Certain states require that, and most people don't realize. And that can really help out a lot in trying to prevent you from landing in a courtroom. But yeah, we do exercise those. Sometimes just be aware you can file a lien. You may not get your payment. One case study was I had a project that the contractor ended up going bankrupt in the middle of the project. We were one of 7 other contractors filing liens on the properties, and ours was probably the smallest ticket. We weren't getting paid. But, it's like, all right, get in line because, it works in that sequence. But in that instance, the lien was literally only as good as the paper it was printed on.
Yeah.
So,
So last question about contracts, Will. Is there a difference between that homegrown contract that a lot of contractors start with, just putting it together themselves, and then having a professional come in and design a contract for their business?
yeah, I mean, I think like, first off, if you can and you have the relationships, if you're a part of a local home builders organization or association, somebody there has a contract they're happy to share with you. And I think that's really powerful is when you can lean on that and lean on their resources, because some of these larger companies, they have a legal team in-house or they have legal counsel. But I would pull that and heck, even run through ChatGPT and then get it in the hands of an attorney to red ink it. And it's worth it, man. If it's, let's just say it's $300 to $500 for the attorney to review that and push back, man, the amount of interest charges on late payments, just the clarity for the customer, which that's another benefit. Good contracts are like an extra layer of customer service, if you think about it. It's not a handcuff. And I think a lot of folks look at them like they're handcuffs when they're not. They're just a well-written explanation of what the terms, acceptance, and consideration are for the company and that customer. So hopefully that answers that question, Terry. I'm tired of talking about contracts. No more. I'm just
No
kidding.
more. No mas. No mas.
I love to talk about contracts, actually. It's kind of one of those things where it's ever changing in our industry. You know how it was when post-COVID, like you didn't know if you were getting materials or what the hell the cost of the materials were going to be by the time it got to your dock.
Yes.
So we had clauses in there that just temporarily, we, ended up having to put a clause in there just stating plainly that we don't know if there's going to be a rapid influx of material costs between now and the time that we get to do your job. So just be aware that we may have to adjust our pricing based on market conditions before we do the work. Knock on wood, we never had to exercise it, but we had to disclose it. And that was just back to a contract being a method of good customer service. So
No, understandable. So now, Will, let's move to how do you sell yourself? And so this idea, do you go door to door and do canvassing or for your business or not?
It's weird. We're seeing, especially since last year, with lead costs going up, and some companies and industries, door to door has been like the way they've always done it. Now, I have never done door to door. I also know that depending on what state you're in, there are laws prohibiting or licensing door to door sales techniques or marketing. So you have to be careful. I even think in my neighborhood, my community that I'm in north of Oklahoma City, you have to have a license You have to go to the county office or the city office. It's like $45. And you can't just walk around going and knocking on doors because, part of that is safety reasons, so they got to do a background check. I know Maryland is the same way. So I do not personally do door to door. We are seeing that a lot of contractors are having success with it, but they're also, I think what they're saying that they're having success with is canvassing, which we have a lot of success with. And we forgot this up until like 2024 and leads were increasing in price or cost of leads were going up. We just got really good at door hangers, and making sure we were putting a yard sign out at a customer's house and hitting every house in that neighborhood. Heck, you've seen it. Some of these neighborhoods in certain metropolises, man, they got like 1,800 homes in them. And people see that truck and then they see the yard sign. Those, in my definition, are called silent referrals. They don't know that neighbor, but because that neighbor selected you as a contractor, they're more likely to trust you just because of that reason. So door hangers, we started ramping up. And if you are thinking about doing door hangers and canvassing, just be patient. It's the flywheel effect where, as you start, you're not going to see results. But then as you get more and more consistent, we see anywhere between 10 and 15 leads a month just from our door hangers. And it's like, man, 10 to 15, and those door hangers are dirt cheap. This sounds really bad, but this is the green hippie coming out in me, Terry. I just don't like litter, and I don't like contributing to litter. So if you want to do that, like, at least make sure it's a good door hanger that's going to stay on in the wind, and not you're just allowing door hangers to go flying down the neighborhood streets on a windy day. That's one thing we train our team on is like, hey, listen, we want to be known as a good contractor, not the guys that are littering everywhere.
Well, I've had property where storms have come through and had hailstorms taking out roofs, and you'll see it like as soon as that happens, next thing you know, you got 3 or 4 different business cards up underneath your door. All of those roofers trying to gravitate to that business. And then you'll see one neighbor will go with one guy, and then it's the next one. You see the yard signs start to
The domino
populate,
effect.
and it's
Yeah, it's like, man, that sales guy had a great commission check coming his way when you see that. Yeah. But yeah, we do that all the time where it's like, we get our yard signs out and then we canvass and then somebody picks us and then we do it again. Then we do it again. And I love how Danny Antonelli, you remember that podcast, he said, try to become 5 Mile famous, right? And that's how you do it, is not blasting, high cost, like broadcast television advertising, billboards, things like that. It's when you get that job in that neighborhood, man, take over that neighborhood.
Yep.
And you do that by having branded trucks, yard signs, door hangers and canvassing, and then also even geofencing with your social. And then that way you're not chasing people over a broad, massive territory. Man, you're just taking out these neighborhoods and conquering those neighborhoods from a brand perspective. So that's what I find so helpful. So door to door, can't answer that one specifically. I don't do it. A lot of people do, but canvassing, heck yeah, go out there and get it done. So,
well, and one thing, you're talking about branded trucks, branded marketing, stuff like that. You also have to have your people branded, and then you need quality folks out there that are making sure your brand looks good, right?
Tradies, running your small business can be demanding. You got suppliers you got to work with. You're managing crews. Hell, you're chasing sales. It's a lot to take in. Listen, if you want to grow your business, you got to stop working in it and you got to start working on it. So that's where my friends at Foundation Rescue Supply come in. You're not just getting foundation repair products and waterproofing products and air quality control products. With their nationwide distribution, you're getting a partner who knows how to help you scale. And that's why I use them. The Foundation Rescue Supply team has industry knowledge that'll help make your life easier. You get the tools, the trainings, the systems that you need to move the needle. You want your sales team to close more leads? Done, because they have the proven process for that. You need your crews to work smarter, not harder? Done. Their installation training will get you out there and rocking and rolling in the field. With Foundation Rescue Supply, you're not just buying materials here. You're buying a better business system that they have helped create. and you sell more, you install more, and you grow your team. So the bottom line is this: you get best industry pricing, you get field productivity on track, and you get more revenue out of everybody on your team. So this is your chance to step up, scale up, and thrive. If you are ready to make that happen, head to foundationrescuesupply.com, check out their catalog, and speak to my friends, their team, how you can take beyond the products with your company with Foundation Rescue Supply.
That's one thing we're consistently trying to define is how do we improve our brand, our message, our delivery? And sometimes I think we overcomplicate our messaging as contractors and just say what you do, right? And so then that way you can at least address a need or a concern. But then also trying to make sure that your call to action and name is memorable. Actually, I love the harp on Dan Antonelli in that episode is, the clear messaging and branding is living rent-free in your customer's mind. So the better you can get that in, you can live rent-free in their mind. And that's where, we're constantly dialing that in. We used to get pretty wild with different branding messages for our concrete lifting service. And then we found out, no, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Simple before picture and after picture of what it looked like before and after we were done. And what do you know? Boop, conversion rates jumped. Leads jumped, and it was like, sometimes the keep it simple, stupid principle does work.
Well, in that marketing, when you show before and after, you're also educating that potential consumer on what concrete lifting is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, most people don't even, we think because we've been in the industry so long that, oh, yeah, this is common knowledge. It's not. It's not. People are not, they got busy lives. They're working, they got kids, they got all sorts of crazy things. They're not sitting around on TikTok and Facebook looking up, what are the cool ways to fix my house? Granted, some people could argue they are because of DIY stuff, but for my particular specialty niche service, yeah, they're not looking and educating themselves on it. So I would dare to say 80% of my given market still doesn't know who the hell I am. So
That works. All right, well, so if I'm an early startup, right, and I just had a rock star tech come in from another company and join me in my organization, but he wants a cut of equity, how would you handle that?
Ooh, man, see, I wouldn't like that, first of all. Yeah. So first off, if somebody was a rock star tech that was wanting to join my early stage company, man, if they want equity, you're forming a partnership at that point. Now, granted, you could structure it in a certain way in your operating agreement to say, hey, you don't have any voting privileges or things like that. But I have done this with a few different companies. And what I suggest is typically if you have somebody that's just an absolute rock star coming into the market, and then, or not the market, they're coming into your company and they want a cut of equity, they need to earn the equity. Never give out equity, without them earning their stripes. You can typically tie this up into an equity agreement and say, for example, you wanted to give them 4% of the company, but it is vetted and it's written out in the contract this way to where they only earn maybe 1% every year until the total contractual amount is fulfilled. So that prevents them getting a hold of equity in your company that otherwise they could just up and run, but they still own it. And then if they're obviously not in the business, but they're receiving a portion of the profits from that business, that gets into a sticky legal mess. But yeah, I think giving phantom equity is a good alternative. And that's a representative value of equity, but it's not legally bound to the owner. And so you can give them a distributed amount of profit equal to a false equity share. And funny story, I think a lot of employees misperceive equity in a few different ways, and one of which is sweat equity. Hey, I've worked my butt off for you for so long, and I don't own any of this company, but I deserve it, right? And the reason I know a lot about this is because I was that young person many years ago that thought I deserved equity because of all the hard-ass work I did building this company, and realized, nope, I don't actually own diddly squat. So I do believe phantom equity is a better option, and it's easier to make it, in the event, discretionary, because We were talking about COVID before. We didn't realize material costs were going to jump up 30%. We didn't realize that we were not able to get any fleet because of microchip shortages, which suppressed our output. So, that was one of those things where if somebody's got phantom equity, they can ebb and flow with the ups and downs. Because most people that want equity want a payout, but don't want to accept the bad turns that happen in a business. And that's where the ownership lies. And I know we're beating a dead horse here with this question. But when it also comes to equity in a business, that individual, if you wish to give equity away, they should know to a high degree how the financials work in the company. So, for example, the P&L shows, hey, we made $10,000 in profit. Hey, where's my cut? But then they don't understand or take into account depreciation of the assets. Because then you didn't make 10,000. You actually made less. And that creates tension between shareholders, specifically ones that are working in the business, and it creates a lot of headache. And I keep thinking back to Michael Morrison of Boss, Business Owner Simplified. He's gone, what did he call it, Terry? Business divorce. He's been through a few business divorces in the past. Ain't a real one. So he goes, they're all just as bad. And then that's just a breeding ground for business divorces when I hear those types of things. So did that answer that question to whoever asked that question, Terry?
No, I think it did, Will. Thank you.
Yeah.
So for those companies out there that have a sales team, sales manager, and a GM, which one of these is going to be making more money? The sales manager or the GM?
I think it's weird. Well, actually, Terry, let me ask you this. Does the dean of the school typically make more than everybody else, or a professor that's been there 35 years?
No. So in education, longevity makes a very big difference. Level of education. And then sometimes it's the sweetheart contracts that a faculty member can kind of get themselves into. So their salary is not always directly related to how much work they are doing.
So that's why you're down there in San Antonio. You're trying to gun for that raise, bro. Good for you. You're trying to stock up into another set of gray heavy-duty Carhartt shirts, aren't you?
Go up.
Yeah.
No, it can be exceptionally frustrating to see people sitting back on their heels, collecting a paycheck and not putting in as much effort as others. And you see it. In my expectation, it doesn't matter if it's in education or it's in business. Well, you're going to see it sometimes.
Hopefully none of your staff listens to our show. But Dr. Ben Bigelow, if you are out there listening, we hope you heard that last one sitting on your rear end. No, just kidding. We love you, Ben. But anyway, so back to this question. It's weird. I actually see a flipped model a lot of times where, sales managers, because they're driving results, it's a highly incentivized roles, can, during certain moments, make more than a general manager or even a production manager. And, there's a lot of variables there, so it's kind of peaks and valleys.
Yep.
When a general manager, most of the time, if they are making more money, if you do incentivize them on the net profit margins of the company, they're playing the long game, and as they should. But where I see it reversed is, of course, because we work with performance-based pay with companies all over the country where, heck, frontline individuals that are results-based can actually make more than their manager.
Yeah.
And that does make it hard sometimes, because then it's like, hey, I need a production manager or I need a sales manager, but the salespeople and the production people are making more than the manager. And they're like, why would you promote me, or why would I accept the position? Because I'm going to take a pay cut. So we do see that from time to time, but they're different aspects. I think as the company matures, the general manager naturally, because they have more responsibility, should have more. But I believe paying people, results-based and what they're worth. And, man, if they can hit certain targets, yeah, man, give them the money. Let's make it happen as long as our indirect overhead's not getting wild, which that actually is a good question. Kind of a segue here is just be cautious of your indirect overhead or labor, because that's where people get just really hurt on the margins. is they killed it on gross profit margin, but they overpaid on the back end because of some policy that they wrote 2 years ago that they forgot to change or whatever the case is. Or they just forgot to have the difficult conversation of being like, hey, we have to change this policy.
Right.
We see that all the time where the owner has to step up and lead when the company demands it. And sometimes that means the world has changed, so our policies have to change, and that includes pay. So that's just something that a lot of people need to come to terms with.
So, Will, you touched on something. You have a great sales member, right? Someone who's doing a great job, and they would be a great general manager or sales manager. How do you get them to take that step if they're looking at it like, I'm going to make less money? Why would I do that?
Yeah, well, I think it also depends, and I want to be very clear. If somebody is moving into that role, that's a career boosting or motivated role. And what that may end up meaning is they're in that position to further their experience, which may mean that they leave you at some point. But acknowledge that on the upfront. So, but also we find that some of our managers that were internally promoted changed because of lifestyle needs. So, for example, they're having another kid. They couldn't be out there, pounding pavement on the road, or, they had some health things that changed in their family life or even their personal life that required a different skill set, or their body's breaking down. Construction's a hard industry to be in, and sometimes it's like, hey, I can't be out there in 105-degree heat every day anymore. And it's just weird. Well, Terry, when you cross 30, your body starts falling apart. You think, oh, man, this is rough. When you cross 40, oh, man, it's like, boy, I thought my 30s were rough, but damn, these 40s, they hit hard.
Yeah. No, it's always enjoyable to be able to look at young people and be like, you don't know what's coming. Just enjoy it now.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, well, like you're remodeling your place, that commercial space, you probably functioned a little bit better before that massive piece of plaster came down and hit you in the head, right? So that plaster is just one thing that's breaking you down over the last few decades.
No, that was, at no point in time did I understand the value of safety equipment more and how just put it on. It makes all the difference in the world.
That's it, man. I'm glad it didn't take you out.
No. I think we all are. Maybe.
Yeah, that's right. Well, cool. By the way, hold on. I got to pick on Drake. Drake's been in our podcast notes like a little gremlin in here. He had a question. He had it in there and he took it out. And Drake, I know you can hear us. It was like, how much did you get from USAID? I didn't get any from it, but you know what? If I did, Elon's gonna find it, right?
Oh yeah. Trust me, my expectation is if you were getting those sums of money, I don't think I'd be talking to you.
Oh no, here he is in the show notes. Here it is. I love it. That's how the professors get paid. Oh, that's funny. I love Drake when he communicates us from the beyond.
I know.
Quiet.
Voice from above.
I know, right?
So,
I love it.
So, Will, you touched on something about, as an owner, having to have those hard conversations, right? So how do you talk with your people about there being a reduction in pay or being a change in their benefits or the pay structure? And do you give them a heads up and a lead so it doesn't hit them next paycheck?
Yeah. So, well, first off, reduction in pay or workforce is not something that, and I hate that it's the norm in a lot of industries, that it's a big surprise and all of a sudden, bam, it hits you. People can see that wave coming. And, I think for small businesses in particular, over communicating the reality of circumstances are very, very important. So I've had to do both, regretfully, in the past, but we over communicated the fact on the why we had to reduce pay. We were also underscoring the fact that it is temporary. And the most important thing, if you got to reduce pay, like you've got to reduce your own as the owner or leadership team. It can't be like, hey, we got to reduce everybody's pay, but I'm going to still, keep my high salary and take my distributions. No, you have to, from a leadership perspective. And if anybody wants to disagree with me, disagree with me. I don't care. Go ahead and troll me on the comments if you want. But I believe it's very important to where it's like, hey, if as an organization, we're going to get through this together, but it's temporary. And we did have that post-COVID. I know we brought it up a few times where it was like, all these costs are increasing. We don't know what's going to happen. So like we're all going to pull back a little bit. And then at a certain threshold, we're going to bump everybody back up. And then we actually did, out of that, have enough accrued savings that we gave it back to the employees at a later date, which was helpful because that's when cost of living was skyrocketing. And we're able to give that back to the employees. So just preparing that way helps tremendously. So over communicate any of those at any given moment. You got to explain the why, but then you got to share the burden as well and show them that and let them know, because I think it was in one of the chapters of Extreme Ownership that said there's no bad teams, only bad leaders. And if there is a reduction in workforce or pay in an organization, that is ultimately the leader's fault. Now, you could argue, well, like, we didn't know there was going to be a pandemic or all these, pick your reason. But the fact is a good leader is preparing for all of those under any circumstances. That's why we do the same thing where it's like, hey, we're constantly putting money into cash hold in our company because we don't know what the hell's going to happen in the next few years. But it's a hell of a lot easier to manage those times when you got cash in the bank.
Yep.
And you can really work through it. So that's how I've done it. And they're not fun. All of those suggestions don't make it any more fun.
So how are you transparent with your workers? Like, do you have open books? How do you communicate where the company stands financially? And do you share this out quarterly or yearly or what?
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me look this up. So there's a great book called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. Great Game of Business.
Okay.
And by the way, Jack Stack really turned around International Harvester back in many years ago, and he believed in open book accounting. It is one of the hardest things, and I will say, full disclosure, I've never been able to complete this as a owner of open book accounting. We try to share as much on our financials. And also, I think that's good, even if it's not all the time, it shows that, hey, these are our numbers, and this is what they are. You don't have to understand them, but just the fact that I'm showing you builds trust with employees. We have had, on a quarterly basis, some profit and loss reviews with employees to show how they can influence it and answer any questions that they have to show that we care, that they know. And open book accounting is a great tool. It's very difficult to implement. I know there's companies out there that have done it. I've just never found success with it. But that doesn't mean I'm going to give up. I'm going to keep trying.
Right.
And that helps tremendously in communicating it, because then, well, in the example before, when we had to reduce workforce or pay, I know that not everybody loved it. I'll never make everybody happy, to be clear. But we had a bunch of employees that were genuinely concerned about Sydney and I, and thankful that we were taking the cut with them, and they wanted to make sure we were okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, but like, this is about you guys. But because we had done so much, and they also knew that we weren't living some lavish lifestyle, they don't view us as greedy people. Our employees don't. Now, granted, there's always one out there, no matter what you do. But like I said, I can't make everybody happy.
No.
And if you are a leader out there, you've heard the saying, if you try to make everybody happy, you make nobody happy, right? So just get used to that.
Well, speaking from knowing you and knowing your wife, my expectation is your employees were thoroughly concerned about her, and you're just lucky you live in the same house.
Yeah, they didn't give a shit about me. Yeah, that's right. And I would say this, like, actually, let's just have a quick leadership conversation real quick.
God.
If you are a business owner out there and you literally have pictures of you on your boat posting just like trash and sharing garbage on social media, I got news for you. Your employees are looking at that stuff.
Yep.
So, and it's casting this large shadow of your character. And if you're dealing with turnover and things like that, like, first thing you should do is go to your social media page and be like, what message am I sending? Right? I mean, I'm no, poster child for this, but most of our stuff is about, the work we do, the software we do, our camp for kids. and things like that. I'm not
Yep.
posting inappropriate, bigoted stuff on my page. Now, granted, freedom of speech is a real thing, but leadership is a real thing too. And people are watching you. And if you don't think your people watch you or your candidates look up your social media, you're crazy. Man, it's just nuts, the stuff I see on business owners' social media page. I'm like, clean that up, dude.
Well, if you're trying to rally folks behind you and lead them in through a difficult time, it is exceptionally hard when they're looking at something and they're seeing you loving life and living life while they're worried about next week's or next month's bill. So,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you that. Like, so obviously at your university, did they have a social media policy for your staff? We don't have one here, like at our company, but I mean, is that a thing? You didn't read the handbook, did you, Terry?
I'm thinking back. So the expectation is that if you're in a position where you can be easily identified, that you keep it professional. And obviously, there have been instances where you have individuals exercising their freedom of speech, and possibly having it have a negative effect on their position. It's the same thing. You don't want to bring undue attention to your organization because of your stupidity. And so you always make sure that if you are going to go out and be stupid,
Oh, man.
you're
Yeah.
not representing that place.
Yeah. Yeah. It just blows my mind, just some of the stuff that's posted.
Yeah.
By the way, side quest here, Terry.
Uh-oh.
Do you have like a neighborhood Facebook group that you're a part of, like up there in your area? I know you live on a farm, but like Guthrie.
Well,
neighborhood
I have
group?
no neighbors. My closest neighbor is
Your wife.
yeah. My closest neighbor is a cow.
Yeah.
Not my wife.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
My closest neighbor is cattle.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I cannot imagine what it would be like to live in a situation like you live in.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, yeah, by the way, I grew up on a farm too. So I look at my neighborhood thinking, man, I remember when I could go piss outside.
You still can.
Yeah, I still can. But
You just might get arrested.
hey, so no, side quest here. Like somebody tagged me in a post in our neighborhood group, which has, 1,500 homes in this neighborhood group. Somebody was needing our products and services, and a neighbor tagged me directly in it and my company name. And so, like, of course, they're going to look at my social media page. So it was like, and thank God I keep that stuff clean for those reasons. So when you're posting just like sexist or bigoted stuff on your social media page, everybody's seeing that stuff. Your employees, your customers, your referrals, they're going to look you up. So even as little as being in a Facebook group in your neighborhood is super huge. By the way, I'll have to send you a picture or a video. In my neighborhood a few weeks ago, somebody posted like their camera off their garage. Like, does anybody know who this is? And is somebody in a car like hit this mailbox, which is a masonry mailbox, and it racked this little car. Like that mailbox did not budge. and like the car just like clunk, and I don't know what they were doing. Obviously it was in the middle of the night. We can make assumptions, right? But he just like backed up, definitely knocked the headlight out, and then just took off.
Well, and I think that is a perfect example of why we need quality masons out there in the industry.
Yeah, back to masonry, tying it back in. I love it. So
no.
all right,
No,
cool.
all right.
Moving on.
So, Will, it was just a few weeks ago, I went through the Home and Garden show up there in Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. Do you have your organization do home shows still? And if you do, how do you maximize that return?
Oh man, I love home and garden shows. I love them. They're low cost per lead. So when you're thinking about home shows, and Michael Soto is a good case study. He's a friend of mine here that owns a flooring company. He's on the show.
Yep.
He was so hesitant to spend like this $2,000 on a trade show. And then of course the first one he did, you got to do it to learn. he got like 4 or 5 leads, but then I just talked to him, got his second year in and got 17 leads. And it's just like, man, you got to pay to play, as I say, but also you just got to do it. So, yes, big fan of home and garden shows. They reduce our cost per lead. The conversion rates, typically from lead to appointment, are lower. So you got to do really good to try to book appointments at the show, not take all the information back to the office and then pummel people on Monday, because they're also getting hit up by all the other vendors. But, and somebody out there probably will disagree with me, do not let your sales team staff the show. If you have salespeople, I typically do not agree by having them run the show, because they pre-qualify or they don't push to try to seek an appointment. They just give me your information or call us if they're not very qualified. So we use home show promoters, which was a big team before COVID, but now it's just one person. And then also some folks from our call center. So like our customer care team, we'll give them a day off during the week, and then they'll take shifts on the weekends. And that's what they're used to. They know some of the basic product knowledge for what we do, but their job is to book appointments, and they're very, very easy to get along with, and they're just sweet people. I do suggest that. Keep it simple in home and garden shows. However, any chance you can get to introduce some video, I mean, you only get that person for like 10 seconds at a home and garden show. So it's like you got to grab their attention. So we have found time lapses and television. Time lapse of any service is great. Concrete, flooring, concrete work. People just lock onto them.
Yeah.
And so using those will maximize the returns. We have experimented with the larger booths versus the basic 10 by 10s. Really what we found is there was no difference between the larger booth. So, you see these big companies, they have now granted, they probably know their business better than I know it, but Renewal by Anderson has these massive 20 by 20 booths. I don't need that. And I would dare to say most in-home service contractors don't need that either, especially if you're smaller size. A 10 by 10, more personable. And people appreciate that in a lot of areas where they can talk to a contractor that is a real human being and not some, big corporate monster. So I love them. I go there. I actually hang out at the home and garden shows. I know a bunch of the contractors there. I love to talk to them and see how business is doing. And I see a lot of my customers and make sure they're still happy. And yeah, do them. Book, just try 2 or 3. Hell, at my height, I was doing 40 home shows a year. And man, I love them. I wish I could go back to doing that, but there's just not as many anymore.
Do you incentivize when you pull, like you said, you pull your call center folks to these events? Do you incentivize them like you do your typical sales folks?
Yeah. We do what's called a booker bonus. So, if they get something set, I think it's $2, but then when the appointment happens, they get $5, because that's where the value is we have to make sure that it's not just phantom appointments sitting on our schedule. So yeah, if you're at a home and garden show, I do recommend incentivizing being able to book appointments, make sure the appointment stays. So they get really good at making sure those are confirmed. And because that's where the real kind of conversion train starts is, we got to get those appointments set so we can give a quote, so we can sell the job and we can do the job. But also, I think it's really important that contractors, if you're doing home and garden shows and you don't convert the customer into an appointment, use this machine called the internet to just constantly put information in front of them for free, educating them on who you are, the services you provide, what your core values are, some case studies of jobs that you did around the neighborhood. And sequencing in email services and CRMs have become so easy at this. Like, you can easily drip information to a customer for years until finally they need your product or service. And most of them are not upset about it if they truly need your product or service. So that's my service in particular. I fix foundations. Well, those problems don't happen quickly. And sometimes they don't need me at all. But then all of a sudden something changes and it's like, who do I call? Oh, that company that is kept in communication and show me about their community initiatives, sent me their case studies and also education on why houses move. And then that's where it's like we forget how easy that is to keep in contact with customers, even if they're not responsive to you. So That's where the extra secret sauce comes in on home and garden shows that I love. So,
Will, I know we all have our own KPIs out there, but what percentage of revenue is your office staff at? And then when you're looking at your management overhead, where are you at?
well, it's high. Yeah. Actually, it's
Too high, right?
it is too high right now. So there you go. If everybody thinks Will and Sydney are just living the freaking dream over here, we are actually a little top heavy currently as an organization for two reasons. Number one, we are in the slower season. So our output, obviously our installs, we're doing less of them than we would in the summer, right? But we were also staffing up for a high growth year. So we knew that we would be over. So let me break this down and be more specific to your question. So home service company, residential focused, if they're between 1 and 5 million, they really need to be anywhere between 3 and 5%. You can see 6%, just depends on how much work you're willing to do as the owner. And I got a great case study for that. Now, if you're a larger organization, 5 to call it 15 million, it's very common to see, your indirect overhead be anywhere between 7 and 10%, because you now have a full suite of managers over each department, the marketing, the financials, the sales, the production or ops, all of those. And because of that, you're also at that level, you're probably priced and positioned better in your market to sustain it, a higher price level to accommodate all that overhead. So to be clear, Terry, ours is 13% right now. So it's like, man, it hurts. It burns. It burns. Yeah. Which is by far that's redlining right now for us. But it's just funny how it works. We knew that. It's kind of like, yeah, we're going to break the bone so it can heal better. Does that make sense? So it's like we're going to just re-break the bone. And so, by the way, I say 13%. That's what it was in Q3 2024. 13%. It's already down to 10.1% Q4. So it's trending down where we need it to be. But, when people ask me that question, you kind of have to break it up in size. And here's a unique case study here. Some friends of mine and customers that are in Virginia, they're knocking it out, man. By the way, this is not a small outfit. This is a big outfit. 18, 19 million a year. 23, 24% net profit. I mean, just killing it. But then I go into their organization, I realize, the owners are still doing a major part of the indirect overhead. And they're grinders, man. They just get after it. They do it. And so they're sitting in a lot of management seats, obviously saving that cost. But I'm like, you know what? I like the sound of your net profit. I'm just not going to fucking work that much.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, that is grinding. So
what you're saying is, if someone is still thoroughly involved up to their elbows in the business and has a really low profit margin, you got some big problems.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but that's an interesting thing is when I was in the younger days as a business owner, I wasn't very good at paying myself the market equivalent of the position I was sitting in. And that's a great way to stress test the business. Greg Crabtree wrote a great book about this. And it's like, if you're going to be in the sales manager seat, pay yourself the role of the sales manager, right? So then that way, when you find a sales manager, the company has been stress test to pay for that. And then as you move up, you got to pay yourself the equivalent of that.
Yeah.
But it is funny. I told somebody the other day, and boy, it became a shit show in some social media comments. I'm like, I would much rather have 10% of a $12 million company, than 22% of a $20 million company. And I meant that by profit. And it was really about quality of life, because it's like, man, I'm not going to sit in those roles. And they're like, well, what the hell? Why would you do that? And I'm like, well, first off, listen, my company is not the only place I'm making money from. I've put money back in investments and made sure that my family is secure no matter what's going on in the business. Now, the business is my main driving force, but kind of back to the business leadership perspective, I prepared myself personally to accommodate the ebbs and flows that just come with business. But also showing my age here, Terry, my days of throwing around 60, 70-hour weeks are done, buddy. I got to carve out more time drinking beer with you. Yeah.
I'd love you say showing my age as you're younger than me. I just
Dude, hold
appreciate
on,
that.
wait a minute. Didn't we settle this the other day? How much younger am I? Like 5
Oh,
months?
by months, but it still works.
Oh, okay. Well, so that's okay. You're taking your role as the more mature one in the relationship. Good for you, Terry.
Never refer to this as a relationship.
A bromance. Hey,
Bromance, right?
that's right.
All right. So, Will, I've been down here, and one thing that I've been seeing, which I haven't seen before, and it might become a lot more common, I'm getting two prices at any of these establishments. I get the cash price and I get the credit card price. And it's even on the receipts. So when that is happening, what are you using for your credit card processing? And why did you choose them? And is there an increase in cost?
So, is that happening down in San Antonio, like at normal like restaurants and stuff?
Yep. No, there is a price. You have that cash price and you have that credit card price, and it's listed.
Interesting. Yeah, so it's kind of like the price is different if I can take what you give me and put it right in my pocket, right? But no, I know it's buried in credit card processing fees. But
And it's happening at bars, restaurants, stuff like that.
so, I mean, how much of a hard time are you giving your bartender down there? I mean,
You would be surprised at how many people don't think I can do basic math at times.
I love the conscious known as Drake is kicking in on my shoulder. He said, "What about the back alley? Are they doing the same thing out there?" Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Well, no, like so. Oh man, Sydney and I argue about this all the time, and I love it. But I hate increasing barrier of entry for people buying from me. So it's like, make it simple and build it into your margins. So it's like, I'm not going to stop the process, be like, oh, you want to pay with a credit card and get those miles? Well, that's going to be an extra 3%. It's just another way to stop the flow and the natural progression for someone wanting to pay me for my products and services. So reduce the barrier of entry, build it into the cost, and move on. And that's the simple answer, is because, customers do deal with decision fatigue. They got all these moving parts. And when you can remove these small incremental decisions for the customer, it makes it easier for them to buy from you. And it is you don't think about it, but it's part of a sales process to do that. So yeah, I build it into all my costs. And if a customer says, hey, if I pay you cash or check, is there a discount? I'm like, nope. I actually already worked that out. Also, cash is actually, in my opinion, more frustrating for me now because I can't deposit that wirelessly. I have to go to the bank now, and it's like the modern equivalent of the freaking DMV at the bank now. It's like, who wants to sit at the bank, try to cash this stuff? And also, like, you open the window and it all flies out the window. Like, there's no recourse if you lose that cash. Yeah.
So I know that there's going to be comments about why are you not using cash and stuff like that. But you also don't want to put your sales guys or your technicians in a position where they're carrying around that much cash because they collected it from a customer.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, we still do cash, and some people just want to do it, but we've got some great people that we've got a safe that they just drop everything in, and they've got the amount written on it, and we backtrack it. But yeah, in certain scenarios, now granted, I'm not in a like major crime zone area, right? But there's certain areas where, man, like I have seen, guys that took a payment, put it in the console of the car, and then that night their car got broken into. Poof, gone. Now, as an employer, like, how much do you really trust that? Even though it could be, and obviously we've done that and requested police reports, things like that, but it's like, man, there's just too many variables. A check can be canceled, a credit card can be canceled, or a payment can be reversed. But man, cash is one of those where I think you see it, the normal evolution of it is eventually it'll just go away as a currency for our products and services. It'll never go away completely, but way of payment for those, especially with financing and other things like that. So
Have you taken Bitcoin yet?
we have actually been offered by a few customers to see if they would take Bitcoin or if we would accept Bitcoin. And the answer is no. You know, I don't know enough about it. And I know there's a lot of people out there that understand blockchain and how that works and all, but it's like, no. Like, I just need something to deposit in my bank account. So if you want to pay Bitcoin, you cash out your Bitcoin and then pay me in the currency that I have provided, credit card financing, check, or cash, of course. But that's just the process. And I know that's totally hypocritical of me because I said reduce the barrier of entry, except for that. It's like, what are they called? ETFs or non-fungible
Non-fungible. Yep.
Yeah, like, can I pay you in some internet art? It's like, no, bro. Like I can't pay my employees with that. Anyway.
So if you're looking at trying to source funding for an acquisition, Will, what is going to be the best source for you to go to? Are you looking at a small business loan? Are you going at seller financing? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so me personally, first thing I'm going to do is see, well, out of the deal, the best thing is how much can this be seller financed? I am a big believer in having a portion, not all, be seller financed. It lets them put some skin in the game for the transition. It also gives them some tax benefit as well, but also helps on the cash flow aspect for me. So I do like having some portion, at least at a minimum 20% seller finance. I've gone as high as 60% seller finance, depending on the deal. But also most of it is done through the bank. If they have squeaky clean financials, you have squeaky clean financials, which, by the way, nobody does. Like, if you went through my books, we'd find something. Like, oh, crap, we forgot to, mark out that inventory adjustment for that quarter. But, the bank's really going to be looking at your credit history. And, Josh Adele is a good example. We had him on the podcast a few weeks ago. And, they're going to lean more on us first and looking at, hey, it's just as simple as writing a business plan. But first addressing a good banker, because I think sometimes the paperwork for an SBA could be a little heavy and intensive. When in fact you may not need to go through that. But there are some 7M or 7 micro loans through the SBA that are awesome. And great interest rates, things like that. If you're willing to go through the paperwork, it's just paperwork heavy. So I don't go that route just because it's a pain in the ass. We self-fund all of these now. I do believe if you can form out some of this and, back to, boy, this is where my hypocrisy shows up. These are good questions, Terry. It's like, would you give me a discount if you paid cash? And then if I was entertaining buying a company and be like, well, if I paid you cash outright, would you consider a lower rate or a lower multiple? So this is where I'm a hypocrite. But, traditionally, you're acquiring assets, and those are completely fine to also be used as collateral. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Even I have seen deals where the inventory on hand can be a form of cash or seller financing. So, hey, Mr. Seller, you are going to take your inventory on hand, and we're going to run through that, and you retain the returns from that inventory as a form of your down payment. And then, so then that way, rather than paying a lump sum down payment to the seller, you're using that as a way to fund the down payment out of what's there, and it gives you a great way to stress test it. If you are doing earnouts, I would be careful to make them based off of net profit. Most of those are gross profit margin that they're based on, and they can extend anywhere between 2 to 5 years. And I have seller financed 2 deals before, and one was 100% seller finance, and then the other one was a partial. And then those were great tax shelters for the sellers. And then the other ones have been more structured to where they were the bank or cash outright. The good thing is if you're doing any of this, just write a business plan around it. And I'm not thinking anything fancy. Just go to Word and search business acquisition template, and then you'll find it, and it allows you to plug and play and fill in the blanks. So hopefully that helps.
No, I think it does. Well, we're coming up on time, and we always ask this question.
Oh, wait! I've answered this question more times than anybody else on this show.
And personally, I know where you've screwed up because I get this. I've known you for a while, and I see it day to day, and possibly more than once a day.
Yeah.
But as a owner, so take yourself back to your first early years. What's a screw up that you would be able to say you're proud of now?
You know what? If I would have scrolled down, I would have saw this damn question popping up. I'm prepared for it.
That can be your screw up for today. Not paying attention.
Yeah. Starting a podcast. No. Actually, interestingly enough, a big screw up was not paying attention to my debt to equity ratio on my balance sheets. Because when you're growing, it's just like, man, buy that truck, finance it, because you're thinking cash flow. You're thinking cash flow, but you're hurting yourself on the balance sheets. And if you're looking to sell, that's a big problem because it's going to hurt you later. Because, hey, you sell a business for, call it $5 million. Well, guess what comes out of that? The debt. You got to pay the debt out of the proceeds because nobody wants to buy debt. Who the hell is going to buy debt, right? So that was one of my biggest screw-ups, is not realizing how much that would take out of my returns in the potential form of an acquisition. Another one, which I'll add to this, would be, not just the debt to equity function, but not truly understanding how depreciation and tax basis works. So I am an LLC in many of my companies, and most people are like, oh, yeah, it's awesome. We showed a loss, so we don't have to pay any taxes. Well, it's like, dude, you're just rolling over losses as an LLC over to your personal tax basis at some point. It typically, the bill comes due, and if the government is smart enough to realize, hey, if you're an LLC, you can't just continue to hoard losses and it not eventually affect your personal. So not so much with a S Corp or C Corp, but man, I remember, gosh, this was years ago, thinking, man, we killed it this year, but man, we also got really hurt on a few things, and then it went negative. We recovered, but then 2 years later, I went to go buy a house, and they're like, hey, by the way, we see you made money, but your company, because it lost money, it hurt you, and we can't give you a loan for a house. And it's like, hold on, I can pay for this house 3 times over, and you won't give me the loan? And it was all tax reasons. So if you want to learn more about that, there's actually a great book. I'll try to bring it next time. Actually, no, it's Tax-Free Wealth. It was written by the former CPA for Robert Kiyosaki. You brought up Rich Dad, Poor Dad in a past episode. He's the one that wrote it. So pay attention to those financials, peoples. They're important, and they can make or break you. So, but damn, I didn't like the fact that I had to answer that question. What about you, Terry? Was it that you went to San Antonio during the middle of a snowstorm?
No, because I looked at the forecast. You're going to enjoy that 1 degree weather come Wednesday.
I saw -20 with wind chill. It's going to suck. But that's okay. You enjoy your time there, man. I am proud of you for being smart enough to go down there and enjoy it. Otherwise, Terry, I appreciate it. Another Q&A episode down the drain. We did it. Well, not down the drain. I guess that's a negative connotation. But otherwise, to all you guys listening out there, we appreciate your questions, and even appreciate Drake for throwing in some shade and some funny little commentary in there behind the scenes. But we're looking forward to the next few weeks. We got some great guests coming up, some technology guests, some other contractors, and we're going to go international here in a few weeks. I'm pumped about that. So we will look forward to seeing you next week on Beers with Contractors. Talk soon, fellas.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.